the laundry was located right there beside the new girls' dormitory. Kaya kami po, nagpalabaw po dito, no? Dala kami sa mga labunon, mura po nagpisa ng mga ignorante, bitbit sa habol na lang, mas kiinsa na lang to. And that's the time that the ladies, mura makabalus bitaw sila. Maninggit ko na sila mga kaisunan, no? Tingnan si baby kung sa kuna to sa maninggit ito. Isa pa yung mga babae na nakakaroon din, manimalos ko sila. So it regards me, and then we also realize that, oh, mura madaot man yung tuloy ng konbay kung nakaimutan ako. So this is the fact that whether we like it or not, God is looking at us, not perhaps to find fault in us, but for something else. So I have to share with you something, that the fact that God sees us, there are only two chances. First, that may result to benefits, and secondly, because God is looking at me, He is looking at us, it may result to accountability. And let's have first the benefits. Benefit A, that's one, is the absolute assurance that our needs will be supplied. Because God could not afford to close His eyes seeing the needs of His people. Araw-araw naman itong dito, makita ng kaigsunan kay malisod na daw, at ay ikaon, grabe nga itong problema. Makaino na ginawa nga, sorry kayo doy, huwag ko nakita nyo. But this is a truth that is beyond dispute, fellow workers, that God is looking at us. Now, is this true in the experience of Hagar? Let's try to make a contextualized study this afternoon. In Genesis chapter 21, reading from verses 14 to 19. In verse 14, early the next morning, Abraham gave Hagar some food and a little bag full of water. He put the child on her back and sent her away. This is now the time that there was a chaos, there was a conflict in the family of Abraham and Sarah, because at this point of time, natao na ang tinuod yun na anak kasi Isaac. So Hagar was sent away by both Abraham and Sarah, and according to the narrative, that he put the child on her back and sent her away. She left and wandered about in the wilderness of Beersheba. Verse 15. When the water was all gone, so muna ang problema, she left the child under a bush and sat down about 100 meters away. She said to herself, I can't bear to see my child die. While she was sitting there, she began to cry. So you can also relate, those mothers who are here this afternoon, you can pretty well relate the experience of Hagar. Nagili mo maka-afford nga, magtanaw mo sa iyong anak na mamatay because of dehydration. So according to this narrative, she just left the boy right there, and in a few meters, she was there also crying. Then what happened next? God heard the boy crying. And from heaven, the angel of God spoke to Hagar. What are you troubled about, Hagar? Don't be afraid. God has heard the boy crying. Get up, go and pick him up and comfort him. I will make a great nation out of his descendants. Then God opened her eyes. And what happened next? She saw a what? A well. Remember, they were heading towards a vast and wide desert. And yet, because of the fact that God saw them, the boy and the mother, wala makapiyong ang Ginoo sa iyang matang mga kaisunan. Nakita niya ang need. And so, according to this, there was a water. And she went and filled the little bag with water and gave some to the boy. So the first benefit, fellow workers, that brings about the truth, or brought about the truth that God sees us, is the fact that He will supply all our needs. Nakita niya. It is a central truth in Scriptures that God is going to supply our needs simply because He sees them. Karena menghilang mo na ganay kanta, He sees our tears. He sees our tears. Next, there is a promise of the Lord that His eyes are on those who fear Him, on those whose hope is in His unfailing love, to keep them alive in famine. I have bringing this to you because sometimes dili mag-abot ng tumoy sa atong mga hospital. Before pay-off day, wala na mag-quit warta. Mag-quit na lang ko. I have to look for the real pastors. So it is always the case that our institutions has only been a jumping board to some. Hindi ka din experience nila. Lukso na dito, pahingon sa ako, asa na pahingon sila. I will also encourage you to do that. No? If that is God's will for you, some of you might be going to America or to US, Canada or wherever. If that is God's will, no problem. But if we only do that because of fear for the future, because of anxiety and the like, I will tell you, listen, kaya naman, nawala ang ato ang pagtanaw sa truth that God is looking at us and He sees all our needs. Benefit A, 2. Because God is looking at me, He is looking at us. Protection is promised according to His purpose. Siguro 2 years ago, or barely 3 years ago, there was a couple. Mga literature evangelists sila magkaisunan. Perhaps you know the story. Samtang motor ang magdiayon, nibuto ang ligid sa motor, nahagbong ang asawa sa simento. She wore a helmet na kang for compliance ng bitaw nga helmet, mura lang arinula. So, una pa nalagpot ang helmet kaysa sa iyaha. Naigo ang iyang ulo dito sa simento. Naglisod siya. The husband was confined in this hospital. I visited him here. Ang istorya ito, grabe kayo makikisunan. The wife was also confined in Davao Medical School Foundation Hospital. And she was operated, gibuak ang iyang ulo, and according to the surgeon, nag-abot ang left, ang right niya na brain. So, nalahugay makikisunan. Hindi ko na may ilahugay ang ato ang brain, no? Kaya na dito mabuhay na. So, they incurred an expenses of about pila ka 100,000. But the wife passed away. We were alarmed at the mission because the husband was here. Wala siya kahibalo nga patay na yung asawa dito sa pikas. So murag isugong ni Addo, Pastor Cesario, myself, Pastor Tampos, isa pa itong mga tao dito. Ipaanhin din. It was Brother Restauro. So kung tanawin mo ang sitwasyon, pating lisura. Pating lisura. So the question is, where was God when the accident happened? If this is true, that since He sees all of us, then protection is promised according to His purpose. There is a purpose. And the way I look at it, fellow workers, there is a temporal and eternal value of protection. In other words, you might be spared today, but you will not be spared in the future. So there is temporal and eternal. And the way I understand how God leads His people is this. Usahay dili kanya i-save ka ron, pero ma-save ka eternally.